Most criminal organizations collapse the moment their leader is removed from the equation. When the cell door slams shut, the hierarchy fractures and the empire begins to crumble. But inside a 6 by 8 foot maximum security cell in the United Kingdom, one man proved that isolation has its limits. He was behind bars, stripped of his freedom and under constant surveillance. Yet, as he sat in that cell, his businesses continued to trade. Millions of dollars in capital moved across the globe. Uninspected shipments arrived at international ports on schedule, following orders issued from a man with no legal access to a phone. Police realized they hadn't just arrested a kingpin. They had incarcerated someone who spent years building a system specifically designed to operate without him. To understand why the bars failed to stop him, we have to look past the surface level of his crimes. We have to analyze the internal mechanics of a network that functioned with the precision of a modern corporation. The system began in the 1990s in an industrial British city where the local economy had largely evaporated. In neighborhoods where the government had stopped providing basic services, he saw a vacuum of authority. Most street-level criminals rely on violence to keep their people in line. He realized that while violence creates temporary compliance, it also creates informants. Loyalty, however, is a much more stable currency. He spent years acting as the community's unofficial bank and its primary employer. He offered interest-free loans to families and provided security for local businesses. He wasn't seen as a predator. He was seen as the only person actually providing a social safety net. This chart shows his organization. At the bottom, community support nodes provided the stable foundation for legitimate holding companies. Behind that corporate facade lay the actual logistics of power. Port officials bypassing customs, and legal teams ensuring favorable court outcomes. By his 30s, his operations were deeply integrated, becoming indistinguishable from the community itself. Law enforcement eventually caught up with him following a massive multi-year investigation. Involving hundreds of thousands in surveillance, he was sentenced to a maximum security prison. This diagram illustrates his failsafe. In traditional networks, the hub is a single point of failure. He decentralized years in advance. When the hub is removed, lieutenants automatically form new connections, autonomously making tactical decisions through a lateral chain of command. But even with this automation in place, he stayed in the loop. He had spent his career managing people and wasn't about to hand over the keys just because he was in a cell. He turned the prison's limitations into his advantages. Using coded messages passed through visitors, a rotating supply of smuggled phones, and lawyers carrying administrative instructions, all protected by attorney-client privilege. The maximum security cell didn't end his career. It gave him an impenetrable headquarters where he could seamlessly manage a global operation with zero chance of the police kicking in his door. The true extent of his reach only came to light when a foreign government filed a formal high-level diplomatic complaint with British authorities. The foreign administration discovered its civil servants were making decisions completely against their own national interests. Money was moving through the country's financial system in ways that pointed toward a hidden external hierarchy. Intelligence officers traced these signals of influence back through international trade routes and layers of shell companies, looking for the source of the corruption. The investigation bypassed the traditional hubs of organized crime. Instead, all the financial wires and trade routes converged on a single cell block in a British prison. Both governments were forced to recognize the corruption had moved past the individual in the cell, embedding itself into the very institutions meant to stop it. If a maximum security prison cannot stop him from influencing a foreign government, how much of his invisible hierarchy is still running today? For years, a massive international criminal syndicate operated at full capacity, moving shipments and executing orders. Its architect sat quietly in a British prison cell, smiling at the security cameras during every single routine search. The guards found nothing, yet the operation never slowed down. The breakthrough came from a single, untraceable prepaid cell phone. It was small enough to hide in the cracks of the cell, so well concealed that 3 previous institutional sweeps had missed it entirely. When a prison officer finally found it, investigators made a counterintuitive decision. They did not confiscate it. Instead, they chose patience. They left the device exactly where it was, monitoring every number it dialed, every text it sent, and every pattern in its silence. This diagram illustrates the concept of network topology, the analytical framework investigators use to map how individual parts of a system connect to each other. By mapping the data from that single phone, they established a central node, the center of a hidden architecture. The physical walls of the prison were irrelevant. Locking a human being in a concrete box does nothing to neutralize their reach if they are still integrated into a distributed network. As the tracking continued, the network's geographic footprint became clear. The single central node branches outward, with dozens of active communication lines radiating from the prison cell to contact spread across 4 distinct countries. The endpoints of those lines were not low-level street operators. The network had co-opted the legitimate economy, reaching directly into corporate law firms, international shipping fleets, and major financial institutions. But the most significant vulnerability was higher up. Thick, direct data lines flowed between the inmate and senior foreign government offices. With officials on the payroll, the daily friction of moving illicit goods evaporated. Lucrative government contracts went to shell companies. Active criminal investigations against associates would open and then quietly close. At strategic moments, border control systems on specific routes would malfunction. Traditional criminal syndicates often rely on physical violence to protect their territory. This operation relied on administrative control. The architect realized that the most effective way to defeat the state's anti-crime machinery is to hire the people running it. The architect bypassed physical barriers by utilizing the state's own corrupted infrastructure, effectively creating a shadow government that fed on the system designed to stop it. Complex systems often share a single point of failure, a specific flaw that can trigger a total collapse. In highly insulated technical networks, that flaw is almost always human unpredictability. Someone inside the innermost circle made a choice to talk. A deeply trusted associate, loyal for years, decided to cooperate with international authorities. When they sat down with investigators, they handed over a complete map of the operation. In a single conversation, they provided exact coordinates for safe houses, hidden financial account numbers, exact shipment dates, and compromised government officials. Law enforcement executed a synchronized wave of arrests across multiple borders. They carefully timed the raids to hit public servants, specialized lawyers, and accountants simultaneously, preventing the network from triggering its redundancies. Back in Britain, the architect was transferred to an ultra-secure facility. Strict communication blackout protocols were enforced, severing his connection to the outside world. The scale and complexity required to run this shadow empire created the very vulnerabilities that eventually destroyed it. In the immediate aftermath, it looked like a total victory. The trials concluded, sentences were delivered, and the visible nodes of the network were dismantled. But behind closed doors, law enforcement officials harbor a more troubling consensus. They believe they captured the visible majority of the operation, but not all of it. The central clusters go entirely dark, but extreme edges remain illuminated. Financial assets are buried so deeply that forensic accountants cannot isolate them. Using autonomous pathways, the remaining nodes find each other, bypassing the destroyed center to resume operation. For this operation, power was not dependent on the architect's physical freedom. He had built an architecture capable of sustaining itself long after he was cut off. The network was designed specifically to survive the absence of its creator. It leaves international authorities with a terrifying, unanswered question: how much of the machinery is still running, and who is running it now?